The storm outside the towering glass building seemed almost too symbolic, dark, merciless, and ready to swallow anything that dared stand in its path. Inside that very building, Eleanor Grant, once the youngest and most celebrated female CEO in the city, stood trembling in the dim glow of her empty office. She looked around at the remnants of a life she had built from brutal work, sleepless nights, and a heart that had hardened long before the world forced it to. Only hours earlier, she had been escorted out of the company boardroom, her own boardroom, stripped of her title, told she had failed, and blamed for a financial collapse she hadn't caused. The company she had poured her soul into had spit her out without mercy. The city lights stretched beneath her like a million tiny reminders of everything she had lost, and as she felt her world crumbling into dust, she didn't know that two tiny hands and two fragile hearts were about to stitch it back together in seconds. Call to action first, placed early as requested. Before the story continues, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unexpected miracles, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support brings these stories to life. Eleanor's downfall wasn't sudden. It had been a slow, silent collapse, disguised beneath her impeccable suits, perfectly calculated decisions, and a reputation for being fiercely strong even when she felt anything but. Behind the cold exterior, she had always been a woman fighting the weight of expectation. A woman who built walls because she feared the world would devour her if she didn't. But losing everything in one humiliating afternoon shattered the last pieces of her armor. She gathered her last box of belongings and award, a stray folder, an old photograph of her father who had believed she would one day lead the world, and walked out through the service exit to avoid the watchful eyes of former employees who might whisper about her fall. Down in the basement corridor, the scent of cleaning chemicals lingered in the air, and the lights flickered faintly. Eleanor paused. A small crash echoed from behind a door, slightly ajar. It was the janitor's closet, a space she had passed countless times but never once stepped close to. Everyone knew Marco, the senior janitor who never missed a shift, no matter how tired he looked. He had always greeted her with warmth she barely acknowledged. But today, curiosity or maybe desperation pulled her closer. Inside the closet, she spotted two little girls sitting on overturned buckets. Identical twins no older than 7 or 8, their small faces pale with exhaustion yet glowing with an innocence Eleanor hadn't felt in years. They were trying to fix a broken lunchbox, laughing softly despite the struggle. Before Eleanor could speak or turn away, Marco appeared, startled to see her. His uniform sleeves were soaked, his hands rough from labor, but his voice was gentle. The twins lit up when they saw him, hugging his legs before returning to their little project. It was a simple scene, ordinary, familiar, warm. The kind of moment that came naturally to people who still knew how to feel. Eleanor felt an unexpected sting in her chest. For the first time in a very long while, she felt small. Marco, unaware of her inner turmoil, explained that he couldn't afford a babysitter. His wife had passed away 2 years earlier, and the girls stayed with him during late shifts. The company allowed it quietly because Marco was one of the few who never complained, even when life smothered him with burdens. Eleanor watched the twins, who were now drawing on the cardboard box with broken crayon, and something inside her cracked, something she had buried under ambition and pride. Her own childhood had been filled with loneliness, raised by a father who loved her but worked endlessly just to keep food on the table. She had become who she was by learning not to depend on anyone. But now, seeing these two little girls finding joy in a janitor's closet while her own life felt like a hollow skyscraper collapsing from the inside, she felt a sharp ache of longing for softness, for connection, for something real. That night, Eleanor left her office building not with the cold rage she expected to feel, but with an unfamiliar heaviness in her heart. She walked to her modest apartment, one of the few financial choices she had made, with restraint, and let herself fall into bed without turning on the lights. But the image of two smiling girls on dusty buckets stayed with her. It lingered even when she wanted to push it away. The next day, she did return to the office. She had no reason to. Instead, she wandered the city aimlessly until her feet led her back to the building she had once ruled. She stood across the street watching employees rush inside, their lives unchanged, unaware that the woman who shaped their futures now wandered like a ghost in broad daylight. She told herself she was only passing by, but when she noticed Marco leaving early with the twins, one holding a worn-out backpack, the other clutching the same broken lunchbox, she found herself crossing the street toward them. Eleanor never intended to speak, yet, somehow, her voice broke free, soft and awkward, asking if everything was all right. Marco's eyes widened, surprised to see her outside the world where she once held power like a sword. He explained quietly that the girls had outgrown their shoes, and he did. T have the money to buy new ones until next month. The girls did. T complained. They walked in those tight shoes with brave little smiles. Eleanor felt something tighten in her throat. Without thinking, she offered to help. But Marco refused with dignity, thanking her for asking. Pride wants tea exclusive to people in suits. Sometimes it lived strongest among those with the least. That moment planted a seed in her heart. Days passed. Eleanor fought the creeping shadows of depression. She spent long hours trying to rebuild her life, applying for jobs, negotiating depths, attempting to understand how everything had fallen apart. Nights were harder. The silence reminded her of what she had lost. She had no family left, no partner, no close friends. In the world she had built, she had become irreplaceable professionally, but personally, she had become forgettable. One rainy evening, as she waited for a bus, she spotted the twins again. They were with Marco, who was struggling against the wind to keep them dry. The girls recognized Eleanor first and ran to her with innocent excitement that startled her. They clung to her like she had always belonged in their world. That night, for the first time since her downfall, Eleanor laughed. And once she laughed, she couldn't stop the cracks in her heart from widening. She began visiting Marco and the twins more frequently, not out of obligation, but because their presence warmed a part of her she thought had died. She learned the girls' names: Lily, the quieter one with big, thoughtful eyes, and Lila, the mischievous spark who could brighten a dark hallway with just a grin. She learned their stories, their dreams, their fears. They taught her little things she had forgotten: how to celebrate small victories, how to find joy in simplicity, how to feel without shame. Marco noticed the change in Eleanor too. He saw how she softened, how the heaviness she carried seemed a little lighter whenever the twins were around. He didn't know what she had lost, but he sensed she was trying to heal. One afternoon, as the sun lit the gray city in soft gold, Eleanor received the final blow. An email stating her bank accounts had been frozen due to an internal investigation. Everything she had left was slipping away. She sank to the floor in her apartment, overwhelmed by emptiness so deep she felt she might drown in it. But that evening, she received a knock at her door. When she opened it, she found the twins standing. They're holding a paper crown they had made from torn scraps of colored flyers. They told her she looked like she needed something beautiful today. Eleanor could hold back tears. She sank to her knees and hugged them, letting the floodgates of her heart finally break open. From that night forward, Eleanor made a decision. She would stop mourning what she lost and start building something new, something meaningful, something human. She began helping Marco with the girls, offering tutoring, buying small necessities anonymously, and creating after-work activities to keep them safe and happy. The more she gave, the more she felt herself returning to life. In the innocence of two little girls who knew nothing of power or downfall, she rediscovered purpose. Weeks turned into months. Eleanor found work as a consultant for small businesses. She used her skills to help struggling entrepreneurs rebuild. Her name no longer appeared on skyscraper plaques, but it began spreading quietly among people who needed real advice and compassion, not corporate ruthlessness. For the first time, she was feared, she was welcomed, and all of it began because of two children who had no idea they saved her. But fate wasn't finished with Eleanor yet. One evening, a major investment firm offered her a partnership position after seeing the success of the small businesses she had helped revive. They wanted her vision, her expertise, and her resilience. But more importantly, they wanted the new version of her, the woman who had learned to lead with humanity. She accepted, but not for power. She accepted because it meant she could do more good. Her first decision in the new role was to create a program supporting the families of low-income workers, janitors, cafeteria staff, maintenance crews, the invisible heroes of workplaces everywhere. She poured her heart into it, dedicating resources, scholarships, healthcare benefits, and child support programs. The first two beneficiaries were Lily and Lila. And when Eleanor stood on stage at the official launch, no longer the cold, sharp CEO she once was, but a softer, fuller version of herself, she looked out into the crowd and saw Marco holding the twins, their faces glowing with pride. In that single moment, she understood that her downfall had never been an end. It had been a turning point leading her toward the life she was always meant to find. Call to action second, near the end as required. If this story touched your heart even a little, please make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your engagement helps these human stories reach others who might need them. Before the story closed, Eleanor left one final message for her viewers, one final reminder she wished someone had given her when she stood at the edge of her darkest day. Special request instructed. Please comment below. Kindness changes everything. Eleanor Grant lost her title, her wealth, and the world she built only to discover a better one, shaped not by power but by love, connection, and the laughter of two small girls who taught her that sometimes life breaks you just so it can rebuild you into someone stronger, softer, and far more human.